My wife cheated on me with my cousin, had his baby, and my family helped hide it for 20 years. Now they want to be in my life again. I never thought I would be writing this. But here I am, still trying to wrap my head around everything. My family, the people who were supposed to love and support me, betrayed me in a way I never imagined. And now, after 20 years of silence, they suddenly want to be a part of my life again, just when I no longer need them. Let me take you back to where it all started. I was 22 when I married Claire. We had been together since high school, and I genuinely believed she was the love of my life. We had been through college, first jobs, and all the ups and downs that young couples face. So, when we finally got married, I thought we were building something that would last forever. For the first few years, things were great, we were happy, or at least I thought we were. But slowly, I started noticing changes. Claire became distant, less affectionate, and always seemed distracted. I asked her what was wrong, but she brushed it off, saying she was just stressed with work. I tried to believe her. I wanted to believe her. Then, out of nowhere, just a few weeks before our third wedding anniversary, Claire handed me divorce papers. No explanation, no discussion, just papers. I was blindsided. I begged her to tell me why, to give me a reason, anything, but all she said was, "I do not love you anymore." That was it. No room for negotiation, no attempt at fixing things. Just a cold, detached decision to walk away. I was shattered, but what choice did I have? I signed the papers and let her go, thinking that was the worst pain I would ever experience. I was wrong. Around the same time, my family, my parents, my younger sister Megan, and even some extended relatives, started pulling away from me. At first, it was subtle. Calls went unanswered, texts were ignored, and invitations to family gatherings stopped coming. I was still dealing with my divorce, so I chalked it up to them not knowing how to support me through it. But then, it became more obvious. I tried visiting my parents' house, only for them to turn me away at the door. I reached out to Megan, but she blocked my number. My parents even cut off communication completely. Without any explanation, I had lost everything, my wife, my marriage, and now, my family, and I had no idea why. For years, I tried to make sense of it. Had I done something wrong? Had I unknowingly hurt them? I tortured myself with questions, but there were no answers. Eventually, I stopped trying. I moved on the best I could. With the support of my friends, I pulled myself out of the darkness. I worked hard, built my own business from the ground up, and created a life for myself. I met Olivia, the woman who would later become my wife. And together, we built something real, something I had lost all hope of having again. And then, just when I thought I had put the past behind me, my family showed up out of nowhere, acting as if nothing had happened. I should have slammed the door in their faces. But instead, I let them talk, and what they told me shattered everything I thought I knew about my own life. I sat there, staring at my parents and sister, struggling to process the words that had just come out of their mouths. Claire had been cheating on me with my cousin, Daniel, and they knew. They had known all along. The weight of their betrayal settled on me like a ton of bricks. I wanted to scream, to rage, to demand why they had chosen to protect Claire and Daniel instead of me. But I could not. My voice felt stuck in my throat. My hands clenched into fists on the table in front of me. "You need to understand," my mother said, her voice hesitant, like she was testing the waters to see if I would explode. It was not an easy decision for us. I let out a bitter laugh. "Not an easy decision? You cut me out of your lives. You let me believe I did something wrong. You let me suffer alone for 20 years. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding my gaze. "Your uncle made it clear that if we stayed in contact with you, we would lose everything. He threatened to destroy our lives, our business. We did what we had to do. So, you sacrificed me instead," I said, my voice cold. "To keep your business, to keep Daniel happy. You chose him over me." Megan, my younger sister, reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "We never wanted to hurt you," she whispered. I turned to look at her, anger bubbling beneath my skin. "You never wanted to hurt me? You blocked me. You refused to even look me in the eye when I tried to reach out to you. And now, after 20 years, You suddenly show up? Why now? What change? They all exchanged uncomfortable glances. That was when I knew. It was not guilt that had brought them back to me. It was something else. I leaned back in my chair and crossed my arms. Let me guess, I said, my voice laced with bitterness. You saw me on TV, read about my success, and suddenly remembered I existed. Silence. My mother fidgeted, my father cleared his throat, and Megan looked away. That was all the confirmation I needed. Unbelievable, I muttered, shaking my head. You ignored me for 2 decades. You let me go through hell alone. And now, because I am successful, you want back in? My father finally spoke. It is not just that. We regret what happened. We want to make things right. I clenched my jaw. You cannot make this right. You cannot erase 20 years of abandonment with an apology. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Please, we just want a chance to fix things. We want to be in your life again. And, she hesitated, we think you should meet your daughter. The air was sucked from my lungs. My daughter? I had a daughter? And they had kept that from me too? The moment those words left my mother's mouth, my world tilted. My daughter, a child I never even knew existed. My heart pounded as I tried to wrap my head around it. I clenched my fists, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. What did you just say? My voice was low, dangerous, as if saying it louder would make it more real. My mother swallowed hard, glancing at my father for support. He exhaled and rubbed a hand over his face, as if he were the one suffering here. Claire was pregnant when she left. She had the baby a few months after the divorce was finalized. A sharp pain stabbed through my chest. My whole life, I had thought Claire left because she had fallen out of love with me. But now, I realized it was much worse than that. She had built a whole new life with my cousin, carrying my child, and never once had the decency to tell me. I let out a humorless laugh. So, let me get this straight, I said, leaning forward. Claire cheated on me with Daniel. You all knew. You let me believe I was the problem. And on top of that, you let me go 20 years without knowing I had a daughter? Silence. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, while my sister looked down at her lap. My father had the nerve to look guilty. It was complicated, he muttered. I slammed my hands down on the table, making them all jump. No, it was not complicated, I snapped. You made a choice. You chose to keep me in the dark. You chose to rob me of 20 years with my child. And for what? To keep my uncle happy? To protect Daniel? Was I that disposable to you? My mother sniffled, shaking her head. It wasn't like that. Then tell me how it was. Mom, I shot back, because from where I'm standing, it sure as hell looks like you threw me away. She had no answer for that. My mind was racing. I had a daughter, a child out there who had no idea I even existed. And my so-called family had known this entire time. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had ever felt before. I stood up, pushing my chair back with so much force that it nearly toppled over. You need to leave. My father stiffened. At least hear us out. I let out another bitter laugh. Hear you out? I think I've heard enough. You want back in my life now that I've made something of myself? You think I'll just welcome you with open arms after everything you did? I shook my head. You don't deserve to be here. My mother sobbed into her hands. But I felt nothing. I had no sympathy left for them. My father stood, his face hardening. This isn't just about us. This is about your daughter. I froze, my breath hitching. Like it or not, he continued, you have a choice to make. Are you going to walk away from her too? I stood there, my father's words hanging heavy in the air. Are you going to walk away from her too? That question cut deep, slicing through my anger and forcing me to confront something I had barely processed. I had a daughter. A child who had lived her entire life without knowing I existed. And now, I had to decide if I was going to change that. But before I could even think about that, I had to deal with the people standing in front of me. I clenched my jaw, my gaze flicking between my so-called family. You do not get to manipulate me, I said coldly. You had 20 years to tell me. 20 years to do the right thing. And you didn't. Now, all of a sudden, you're trying to make me feel guilty for not knowing about my own daughter? That is on you, not me. My mother sobbed harder, while my sister remained silent. My father sighed, shaking his head. We were trying to protect you. I let out a bitter laugh. Protect me? You mean protect yourselves. Don't lie to me. Dad, you didn't tell me because you were scared of upsetting my uncle. You were scared of losing your place in the family business. And in doing so, you threw away your son. My voice cracked, but I refused to let them see how much this was breaking me. My father opened his mouth as if to argue but then closed it. He knew I was right. I exhaled, rubbing a hand over my face. My thoughts were spiraling, but one thing was clear. I was not letting them back into my life. We're done here, I said firmly. You can go. My mother shot up from her chair, her face wet with tears. Please, at least talk to her. She begged. She deserves to know the truth. That made me pause, not because I cared about what my mother wanted, but because she was right about one thing. My daughter did deserve the truth. And for that, I didn't need them. I turned my back on them, heading toward the door. Get out, I said again. I'll figure this out on my own. Son, my father started, but I cut him off. Don't call me that. My voice was sharp, filled with every ounce of betrayal I felt. You lost the right to call me that when you chose to stand by Daniel and Claire instead of me. With that, I walked away, leaving them behind. As I stepped outside, the weight of what had just happened settled on my shoulders. I had spent years building my life back from nothing. I had worked my way up from the lowest point in my life. And I had done it alone. And now, just when I thought I had finally moved on, the past had come crashing down on me. I took a deep breath, staring up at the sky. My daughter was out there, completely unaware of my existence. And now, I had a decision to make. Was I ready to find her? That night, I barely slept. My mind kept replaying everything over and over. My parents showing up at my office. Their betrayal. The bombshell that I had a daughter out there somewhere. I felt like my entire world had shifted. And no matter how much I tried to ground myself, nothing felt real anymore. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I thought about what came next. The anger, the resentment. I knew those emotions would take time to fade. If they ever did. But one thing was clear. I could not let my feelings toward my parents cloud my judgment when it came to my daughter. She had nothing to do with their lies. She had no idea who I was. No clue that her whole life had been built on deception. I had to find her. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the name my parents had given me. Emma Richards, my daughter, 20 years old, a college student. My wife, Sarah, sat across from me, watching me carefully. She hadn't pushed me to talk, just offered quiet support as I processed everything. But now, as I traced my fingers over the name, she finally spoke. What are you thinking? She asked gently. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. I'm thinking I don't even know where to start. Sarah nodded, taking a sip of her coffee. She's on social media, right? Maybe reaching out to her that way would be less overwhelming for both of you. I exhaled slowly. I don't even know what I'd say. Hey, surprise. I'm actually your father. Your entire life has been a lie. Let's talk. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. You don't have to have the perfect words right now. Just start somewhere. Let her know you exist. The rest will come. I looked at her, my heart swelling with gratitude. Through everything, she had been my rock. Even now, when I was dealing with something that could easily shake our entire marriage, she was standing by me. You really think I should do this? I asked. Sarah smiled. I think she deserves to know the truth. And I think you do too. I nodded, my mind made up. Reaching for my phone, I pulled up Emma's social media profile. There she was, smiling in her profile picture, completely unaware that somewhere, a man she had never met was staring at her. Trying to find the courage to reach out, I hesitated for a long time, my thumb hovering over the message button. What if she didn't want to hear from me? What if she hated me for not being there? But then I thought about the years I had lost, about the truth she had been denied. And so, I took a deep breath and typed out a message. Hi, Emma, my name is James Carter. I know this might come as a shock, but I recently learned that I am your biological father. I don't expect anything from you, and I understand if this is overwhelming. But if you ever want to talk, I'm here. I stared at the message for a long moment before finally pressing send. Now, all I could do was wait. The next few days were agonizing. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart leapt into my throat. only for it to be a spam email or a message from work. There was nothing from Emma. No response. No indication that she had even seen my message. I tried not to let it consume me. But it was impossible not to check my phone constantly. Had I said the wrong thing? Should I have phrased it differently? Maybe she had read it and decided she wanted nothing to do with me. Sarah did her best to keep me grounded. Give her time, she reminded me. This isn't something easy to process. She was right, of course. But knowing that didn't make it any easier. Then, on the third evening after sending the message, it happened. A notification popped up on my phone. A new message, from Emma. My hands shook as I opened it. Hi, James. I don't really know what to say. I was shocked when I read your message. And honestly, I wasn't sure if I should even respond. But I talked to my mom about it, and she admitted it's true. So, I guess I just have a lot of questions. If you're okay with that, I'd like to hear your side of things. I exhaled shakily, my eyes reading the words over and over. She knew, and she wanted to talk. Sarah leaned over, reading the message along with me. That's good, she said softly. She's open to hearing from you. I nodded, my mind racing. This was my chance. But I had to tread carefully. I didn't want to overwhelm her. And I certainly didn't want to push her away. After a few moments of thought, I typed my reply. Emma, thank you for responding. I know this must be a lot to take in. And I don't want to pressure you into anything you're not ready for. But if you'd like, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Her reply came quicker than I expected. Can we meet? I stared at the screen, stunned. I hadn't anticipated this. I thought maybe we'd message back and forth for a while, slowly easing into things. But she wanted to meet now. Sarah must have seen the look on my face because she asked. What did she say? She wants to meet. Sarah's eyebrows lifted slightly, but she nodded. Are you ready for that? I don't know, I admitted, but if she is, then I have to be. I messaged Emma back. Of course, whenever and wherever you feel comfortable. Her response was almost immediate. I have a break from classes this weekend. Maybe we could meet somewhere public. Like a coffee shop? I agreed, and we set a time and place. It felt surreal. After 20 years, I was finally going to meet my daughter. That night, as I lay in bed, my thoughts wouldn't settle. I kept wondering what she looked like in person, how she talked, what her personality was like. Would she remind me of myself? Would she remind me of Amy? And, more than anything, would she see me as a stranger? Or would she give me a chance to be something more? The morning of the meeting, I felt like I was walking into an exam I hadn't studied for. My hands were clammy, my stomach was in knots, and my mind kept running through worst-case scenarios. What if she took one look at me and decided she wanted nothing to do with me? What if she was only meeting me to say, to my face, that I meant nothing to her? Sarah squeezed my hand before I left. Just be yourself, she said softly. She agreed to meet you because she's curious. That's a good thing. I nodded, swallowing down my nerves, and drove to the coffee shop we had agreed on. It was a small, quiet cafe near her college. The kind of place where people lingered over their drinks with books or laptops. I arrived 10 minutes early, sitting by the window so I could see her coming. I had only ever seen pictures of Emma on social media. But when she finally walked through the door, I knew instantly it was her. She was tall, with light brown hair tied back in a loose ponytail. She looked so much like Amy when we were younger that my breath caught in my throat. But there was something else, something in the way she carried herself. The way she glanced around before spotting me. A little bit of hesitation, but also quiet confidence. She saw me and hesitated for just a second before walking toward my table. I stood up, my heart pounding. Hi, she said, her voice soft but steady. Hi, I replied, offering a small smile. It's really good to see you. She nodded, pulling out the chair across from me. For a moment, there was silence as we both seemed to take each other in. Then she exhaled, her fingers tapping lightly on the table. So, she said, looking directly at me, where do we even start? I let out a small, nervous chuckle. Wherever you want. This is on your terms. She seemed to appreciate that. After a brief pause, she leaned forward slightly. I guess, I just want to know why. Why didn't you try to find me sooner? I took a deep breath, knowing this was the most important question of all. Emma, I didn't even know you existed. I admitted. Your mother never told me she was pregnant. My family never told me either. They cut me off completely after the divorce and kept everything from me. I only found out about you a few weeks ago. Her eyebrows knit together. You didn't know? I shook my head. Not until recently. She looked away, processing this. I could tell she had been expecting a different answer, maybe something that would justify the anger she must have carried for so long. But the truth was even more complicated than she had imagined. After a moment, she sighed. Well, that changes things. I didn't push her to explain what she meant by that. Instead, I waited, giving her time to absorb everything. Finally, she met my eyes again. So, what happens now? I exhaled, relieved that she wasn't running away. That's up to you, Emma, but if you're open to it, I'd really love to get to know you. Emma stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, her eyes fixed on the swirling liquid as if it held all the answers she was searching for. I could see the conflict in her face. The way her fingers tightened slightly around the cup. The way her shoulders tensed just a little. So, she said after a long pause. What do you want from me? The question stung, though I knew it wasn't meant to be cruel. It was cautious, defensive. She had been raised by people who had lied to her for 20 years. Of course, she would question my intentions. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. I don't want anything from you, Emma. I just want the chance to know you. If you're open to that. She looked at me then. Really looked at me. I wondered what she saw, if she saw a stranger, a potential father, or just another person who had let her down, even if it hadn't been by choice. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. It's weird, she admitted. My whole life, I thought Carl was my dad. I mean, I never really felt close to him. But I never questioned it. And now? Now I find out my entire family has been lying to me. Her voice cracked slightly at the end of the sentence, and she immediately clenched her jaw, like she was trying to push the emotion back down. I can't imagine how hard that must be. I said gently, I know this is overwhelming, and I don't expect you to have everything figured out right now. I just want you to know that I'm here. No pressure, no expectations, just here. She exhaled slowly, running a hand through her hair. I don't even know what a normal relationship with a dad is supposed to look like. That hit me like a punch to the gut. Because she was right, she had spent her whole life without the kind of father she deserved. And even though I wasn't the one who had abandoned her, I still felt responsible. Well, I said, forcing a small smile, I'm new to this too. So maybe we just figure it out together? Emma looked down, tracing the rim of her coffee cup with her finger. Then, to my surprise, she let out a small laugh. God, this is so surreal, she muttered. I chuckled. Tell me about it. She sighed again, but this time, it wasn't as heavy. Okay, she finally said, meeting my eyes. We'll figure it out. Relief flooded through me, but I kept myself from reacting too strongly. She was giving me a chance, just a small one. But that was more than I could have ever hoped for. Thank you, I said sincerely. She gave me a half smile. Still guarded but not as closed off as before. Don't thank me yet, she said. I still have a lot of questions. I nodded, and I'll answer every single one of them. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like something in my life was finally starting to make sense. A week had passed since my first meeting with Emma. We had exchanged a few messages here and there, short, careful conversations where I could tell she was still trying to process everything. I didn't want to push, so I let her set the pace. But then, this morning, I got a text that stopped me in my tracks. Emma, would it be weird if I asked to meet your family? I stared at my phone for a solid minute, reading the message over and over again. My family, my wife, my son, her half-brother. The thought of introducing them felt like something I had once dreamed about but never thought would actually happen. Me. Not weird at all. When would you like to? Her reply was almost immediate. Emma. This weekend? I didn't hesitate. Me. Of course. I'll talk to my wife and let you know the details. I could barely contain my emotions as I went to find Sarah. She had been incredibly patient through all of this, supporting me as I tried to navigate this impossible situation. When I told her that Emma wanted to meet us, she smiled softly. That's a big step, she said. Yeah, I exhaled, still trying to wrap my head around it. I just hope she doesn't change her mind. She won't, Sarah reassured me. She reached out to you. That means she wants this. Even if it's scary for her. We spent the next few days making arrangements. I wanted to make sure Emma felt comfortable. So I suggested we meet at our home rather than a restaurant. I figured a casual environment would be better, no pressure. No expectations. Just family sitting down together. Jake was curious when I told him about Emma. So, I have a sister? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Half-sister. I corrected, but yes. He nodded thoughtfully. That's kinda cool, actually. I couldn't help but smile. Yeah, it is. The day finally arrived, and I could tell I wasn't the only one feeling nervous. Sarah was making sure everything was perfect. Double-checking the snacks and drinks as if Emma was a guest instead of family. Jake, surprisingly, had been unusually quiet all morning, which was rare for a 14-year-old. And then the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath before opening it. Emma stood there, shifting awkwardly on her feet, hands stuffed into the pockets of her hoodie. Hey, she said. Hey, I replied, stepping aside to let her in. She took slow steps inside, her eyes scanning the house. I could see her taking in the pictures on the walls. The little family moments frozen in time that she had never been a part of. Sarah stepped forward with a warm smile. Emma, it's so nice to finally meet you. Emma hesitated for just a moment before nodding. You too. Then, Jake walked in. For a second, they just stared at each other. So, you're my brother, Emma said, her tone somewhere between amused and overwhelmed. Jake smirked. Guess so. Then, to my surprise, he reached out and fist bumped her. Emma let out a small laugh. Well, that's a first. And just like that, the ice began to break. The first few minutes with Emma had been slightly awkward. But as the evening progressed, things began to settle into something more natural. She sat on the couch beside Jake, their initial hesitation melting away as they found common ground in their shared love for video games. Sarah, always the thoughtful one, had prepared a simple but comforting dinner. And by the time we all sat down to eat, the atmosphere had shifted to something that felt, dare I say it, normal. I watched as Emma cautiously engaged in conversation, still holding some of her walls up but clearly wanting to be a part of this moment. So, what do you do for fun? Jake asked her as he grabbed another serving of pasta. Emma shrugged. I like photography, mostly cityscapes. There's something about capturing a moment and knowing it'll never look exactly the same again. Jake nodded, genuinely interested. That's cool. I kinda get that, but with gaming, like recording a crazy play that you'll probably never pull off again. Emma smirked. Not exactly the same thing. But sure, I'll go with it. I chuckled, relieved that they were getting along. Then, Sarah turned to Emma with a gentle smile. And what about school? You're studying journalism, right? Emma's expression darkened just slightly. But she nodded. Yeah, though honestly, with everything that's been happening, it's been hard to focus. I could tell there was more to that statement than she was saying. But I didn't want to push. You don't have to talk about anything you're not ready for, I said carefully. We're just happy you're here. Emma glanced at me, something unreadable flickering across her face. Thanks, she said softly. The meal continued with lighter conversation. And by the end of it, Emma seemed more at ease. She even helped Sarah clear the table, which felt like such a small but meaningful gesture. But just as we were getting comfortable, the moment was interrupted. My phone buzzed on the table. I wouldn't have checked it if not for the sheer number of notifications coming through all at once. Mom, 10 missed calls. Dad, 5 missed calls. Uncle Roger, 1 missed call. Carl, 3 messages. I tensed immediately, my grip tightening around the phone. Sarah noticed first. What's wrong? I exhaled sharply. They know. Emma's head snapped up. Who knows what? My parents. My uncle. Carl. I said, my voice bitter. They know we've met. A moment of silence fell over the room. Emma's face went pale, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. They. What are they saying? I opened one of Carl's messages and read it aloud. Carl. I don't know what you told her. But stay the hell out of our lives. You had no right to contact her. I scoffed. No right? She's my daughter. Emma swallowed hard, her hands balling into fists. They're going to try to control this. Aren't they? I nodded. Yeah, but they don't get to anymore. Jake, who had been listening quietly, suddenly said, so what do we do now? I looked at Emma, waiting to see what she wanted. She took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. We keep talking, she said, and we don't let them decide for us anymore. And in that moment, I knew she was ready to fight for this just as much as I was. The tension in the room was palpable. Emma sat stiffly, her fingers twitching slightly as she processed everything. I could tell she was overwhelmed. And honestly, so was I. The messages, the missed calls, they were proof that Carl and my so-called family were panicking. Sarah reached out and placed a reassuring hand on Emma's. You don't have to talk to them if you don't want to, she said gently. They don't get to pressure you into anything. Emma hesitated before nodding. I know, but it's not that simple. They raised me. They've been my family my whole life. She exhaled, shaking her head. I don't even know what to say to them. I don't know how to feel. I wanted to tell her that she didn't owe them anything, that she had every right to be angry. But I also knew that, for her, this was more complicated than it was for me. While my family had cut me off like I never existed, they had spent 20 years weaving a narrative for her, one in which Carl was her father and I was a ghost. They lied to you, Emma, I said carefully, not wanting to push too hard. They kept me from you because they were afraid of what you'd do with the truth. Emma nodded slowly. And now that I know, they're scared. That's why they're calling. They want to control how I react. She let out a humorless laugh. I bet they're trying to spin this into some misunderstanding. Like they had no choice. I clenched my jaw. That's exactly what they're doing. They're going to play the victim. Say that they did what was best for you. She rubbed her temples. I need time to think. I can't just respond right away. That's fair, Sarah said. You don't owe them an immediate response. You don't owe them anything. Emma looked at her, then at me. What would you do? I sighed, leaning back in my chair. Honestly, I wouldn't answer. Not now. Maybe not ever. They don't deserve a second chance. They took so much from both of us. Emma chewed on her lip. But they're still my family. I hesitated before nodding. Yeah, they are. And that means you get to decide if you still want them in your life. But whatever you choose, I'll support you. Emma stared at me for a long moment, her eyes flickering with emotion. Then, slowly, she nodded. Okay. The rest of the night was quiet. Emma scrolled through her phone. Deep in thought, I saw the unread messages from Carl, from my parents, but she didn't open them. She just sat there, staring at the screen like it held all the answers she needed. As I watched her, I felt a strange mix of emotions, anger, sadness, hope. For the first time, I realized that Emma wasn't just my daughter in name. She was strong, thoughtful, and trying to navigate a reality that had just been shattered. And whatever came next, we'd face it together. The days following Emma's revelation were tense but quiet. She had yet to respond to Carl or my parents. But their attempts to reach her had only intensified. They had moved from calls and texts to emails, and even letters sent to her dorm. One afternoon, as we sat in my living room, she sighed and tossed her phone onto the coffee table. They won't stop, she muttered, rubbing her temples. I woke up to 10 missed calls this morning. Sarah, who had been sitting beside her, leaned forward. Do you want to block them? She asked. You don't have to keep reading their messages if they're just making you feel worse. Emma shook her head. I don't know. Part of me wants to ignore them forever. But another part of me, I don't know. How do I move forward from this? I exhaled, choosing my words carefully. You don't have to decide everything at once. But you do need to ask yourself, do you want them in your life? Do you want to hear their excuses? Emma stared at the ceiling. Deep in thought, I guess I just want to know why. Why they thought it was okay to do this to me. To you. I nodded. I get that. And if you need to hear them out for closure, I'll support you. But just know that whatever they say, it won't undo what they did. She turned to face me. Would you be there, if I met with them? Sarah and I exchanged a glance. Of course, I said immediately. I won't let you face them alone. Emma sighed, running a hand through her hair. Okay, then I guess I should just do it and get it over with. Sarah leaned in. Are you sure? There's no pressure. If you're not ready, you don't have to force yourself. Emma gave a weak smile. I know. But I feel like if I don't do it now, I never will, and I need answers, even if they're just excuses. That evening, Emma finally responded to Carl's texts. It was short and direct. I'll meet with you, but on my terms. I'll bring my father, and we'll decide where and when. Carl responded almost immediately. Of course, just tell me the time and place. The meeting was set for the following weekend. A neutral place, somewhere public. So there could be no dramatics. A cafe near Emma's campus. I wasn't looking forward to it, but if it helped Emma find clarity, I would be there every step of the way. As we finalized the plans, Emma looked at me, her expression unreadable. Do you think this is a mistake? I hesitated before answering. No, I think it's a step forward. Whatever happens. She took a deep breath and nodded. Then let's do this. I reached for her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. We'll do this together. And for the first time since this entire mess started, Emma looked like she had finally found a sense of control over her own story. Life has a way of revealing the truth, no matter how long it has been buried. In Emma's case, she spent 20 years believing a lie, only to uncover a painful reality that changed everything. The lesson here is that honesty and integrity always matter. Family is not defined by blood alone but by the actions and choices people make. If someone betrays you, you are not obligated to let them back into your life. Protect your peace. Choose the people who truly support you. And never be afraid to walk away from those who only return when they need something.